1.Anne Sullivan and Helen Keller. Do you know anyone who is physically handicapped? Sometimes it is not easy to overcome a handicap. But many handicapped people do live successful lives. Helen Keller was one of them, and Anne Sullivan, a partially blind teacher, helped Helen to have a successful life. Helen Keller was born in America in 1880. When she was almost 2 years old, she got sick with a high fever.
Doctor, what's wrong with her? Why can't she see or hear?
Helen's parents were very sad. Because of the high fever, Helen could not see or hear. Soon, Helen could not talk. So, Helen acted like a wild animal. No one could teach her or tell her anything. When Helen was 7 years old, a teacher came to see Helen's parents. The teacher's name was Anne Sullivan.
Hello, Miss Sullivan. Helen has been blind, deaf, and mute for 5 years. She has had many teachers, but no one could succeed in helping her.
I will teach her in a special way. So, promise me that you won't disrupt my teaching.
The next morning, it was time for breakfast. Anne was invited to eat breakfast too.
Oh no! Helen is throwing things again.
Helen's mother began to cry. Anne was surprised, but not shocked.
I will start teaching Helen right now. The first thing Helen will learn is how to sit at the table. Where can I teach her in private?
We have a cabin nearby. Helen has never been there.
Anne and the servant took Helen to the nearby cabin. But they walked and walked around in the woods before they got to the cabin. They wanted to make Helen think the cabin was far, far away from home. At the next meal at the cabin, Helen ate very wildly again. So, Anne took away Helen's food.
No!
Helen felt all around the table and discovered that she was alone with Anne. Finally, Helen sat down at the table. Anne returned Helen's plate of food, but Anne did not let her eat until Helen sat still and used a spoon. Anne taught Helen every day at every meal. Several days went by. Finally, Helen and Anne came to her parents' home for dinner. Helen sat still at the table.
Oh, this is a miracle! I never thought Helen would learn anything again.
Helen also ate her food properly. Anne also taught Helen letters and words. One day, Anne gave Helen a pretty china doll. Anne took one of Helen's hands and put it on the doll. Then Anne spelled the word doll with her fingers in Helen's hand. But Helen did not understand. Anne kept trying to spell the word in Helen's hand. Soon, Helen got so angry that she threw the doll on the floor.
Oh no!
But Anne did not give up. Anne also used the water pump to teach Helen how to spell water.
Water, water, water.
Anne put Helen's hand on her mouth. Now, Helen could feel Anne's lip movement as she spoke. Anne did this again and again. Suddenly, Helen understood what Anne was doing.
W-A-T-E-R.
Helen began touching everything around her. Helen touched the broken doll, and she cried because she finally understood what Anne had been trying to teach her. Finally, Helen was learning. Anne was very happy. She hugged Helen lovingly. Anne also taught Helen to speak. Helen spoke her first word when she was 10 years old. She learned how to talk in only 1 month. Anne and Helen spent many years together. Helen spent the rest of her life encouraging people all over the world. She especially gave hope to the soldiers who had been handicapped because of the war. She wrote many articles. Helen wrote 7 books about herself or her teacher, Anne Sullivan, too. Because Anne Sullivan cared for her and taught her, Helen, who could not see, speak, or hear, grew up to be an amazing woman. Think of the teachers who have cared for you and taught you. Why don't you write one of them a thank you note today?